You're listening to Signal Lost, original alien fiction. New story every week. I'm glad you found the frequency.
A road is an argument that somebody won. That is not poetry. It is just true. Every road you have ever driven exists because a person decided where it should go, and other people agreed, and the ground was cut and laid to carry that decision. Roads are the most deliberate objects in the landscape. They do not wander. They are the shape of 100 years of committee meetings pressed into the earth. I say this because I want you to understand that I am not a man given to mysticism about roads. I am a man who has spent 9 years driving them for a living and has thought about them professionally for approximately 8 hours a day. A road is a decision. It goes where someone put it. That is all it is. My name is Gerald Voss. I am 47 years old. I drove regional deliveries, medical supplies mostly, between depots and clinics across 4 counties. 9 years on the same territory, which is long enough that I stopped thinking about routes at all. I knew that ground the way you know your own house in the dark. I am telling you this because, starting last October, something began, very quietly and very patiently, to move me. Not force me, nothing so crude. It suggested, it offered. It made one option slightly more convenient than another, hundreds of times, over months, until I looked up one day and understood that I had been herded, gently, arithmetically, 4 minutes at a time, several degrees off the life I thought I was driving. And when I finally worked out which direction I had been herded in, I stopped driving. I have not started again. It started with the satnav, so let me be clear about the satnav. I did not need it. That is the important part. 9 years on the same 4 counties. I could have driven that territory blind. I ran the unit out of habit, and because the company logged mileage through it, and because it was pleasant to have a voice in the cab that occasionally said something. It was an ordinary commercial fleet unit, not a phone, not connected to anything except the company system and the satellites. The first detour was on a Tuesday in October, on a run I had done perhaps 400 times. Coming out of the depot, the unit told me to take the ring road east instead of cutting through town. That was wrong. Not dangerous, not absurd, just wrong. The town route was 4 minutes faster at that hour, and everyone in the fleet knew it. I ignored it. The unit recalculated without complaint and put me back on the town route, and I forgot about it inside of a minute. 2 junctions later, it suggested a right turn that would have put me back on the ring road east. I ignored that too, and it agreed with me again and recalculated again. And then 2 junctions after that offered me another road that bent the same way. I remember laughing about it. I remember thinking, the unit's got a bug. It's fixated on the ring road. I mentioned it to the depot the next morning, and they said they would log it, in the tone people use when they are not going to log it. If it had stopped there, I would never have thought about it again for the rest of my life. It did not stop there. It just got quieter about it. Over the following weeks, the detours became less obviously wrong and more difficult to argue with. It would offer me a road that was genuinely reasonable, a bypass, a back route, a way around roadworks I later confirmed were real, and I would take it because it was reasonable, and I would arrive at my drop 4 or 6 minutes later than my usual route. Nothing worth complaining about, nothing worth noticing. But I am a man who drives 8 hours a day and has nothing to think about, and eventually you notice things. What I noticed was this. I was always 4 to 9 minutes late now. Not once. Not on bad days. Always. My whole territory, every run, had quietly acquired a few extra minutes. And when I mentioned this to 2 other drivers on the same fleet, they both said the same thing, with a slight puzzled shrug. Yeah, everything's running a bit long lately. Roadworks, probably. There were no roadworks that could account for it. I checked. I am the sort of man who checks. So in December, on my own time, I started keeping a notebook. Every detour the unit offered me, every day. The road it wanted, the road I would have taken. And because I had a large paper map of the 4 counties on my kitchen wall and 11 weeks of dull evenings, I started drawing them. I drew the detour that the unit had suggested each time as a small arrow on that map. 1 arrow per suggestion. Hundreds of them, over 11 weeks, scattered across 4 counties on every road I drove. And when I had enough of them on the map, I stood back from my kitchen wall and I looked at what I had drawn. Every arrow pointed the same way. I need you to understand what that means, because at first, I did not. The arrows were not all pointing at the same place. That would be nothing. That would just mean the unit liked one particular road. They were scattered across 4 counties, on roads running in every compass direction at every hour of the day. Some were tiny corrections of a few degrees. Some were whole alternate routes. On a map, they looked like nothing at all, a scatter of little pen marks. But the bias was identical. Every single suggestion, wherever I was, whatever direction I was facing, whatever road I was on, had nudged me some number of degrees toward the same bearing, east and a little south, every time, for 11 weeks. Hundreds of instances without a single exception in the other direction. That is not a bug. A bug is random. A bug would scatter. This was a preference, a consistent, patient, arithmetic preference, applied so gently that no single instance of it was worth arguing about, and applied so relentlessly that the sum of it was enormous. I sat down at my kitchen table with a ruler, and I did the arithmetic I had been avoiding. I took my usual routes over those 11 weeks, and I took my actual routes, and I worked out how far off my baseline I had been carried. Not in miles driven, in position, in the accumulated eastward drift of a man being nudged 4 minutes at a time. Over 11 weeks, I had been moved, on aggregate, more than 200 miles east and a little south of where my ordinary working life should have put me. And then I did the thing I wish I had not done. I took the ruler and I extended the bearing. I drew one long straight line out of my 4 counties along the average direction of every arrow to see where the sum of all those small, polite suggestions was pointing. It did not land on a city. It did not land on a depot or a distribution hub or anything a logistics system would have any reason to favor. It landed in open country, in a place where my map showed nothing at all. No town marked, no name printed, just contour lines and the pale blank of unremarkable ground. I went and got a different map, a better one, thinking mine was simply too coarse. The better map showed nothing there either. I did what you would have done. I want to say that plainly, because people ask me why I followed it, and the honest answer is that anyone would have. On the 14th, I finished my last drop at 1:30 in the morning, and instead of turning for home, I turned east and a little south, and I drove along my line. For the first 2 hours, it was ordinary. Motorway, then A road, then the smaller roads. My satnav, and this is the part I have thought about most, did not offer me a single detour the entire way, not one. For 11 weeks it had corrected me every few junctions, and on the night I finally drove the direction it wanted, it had nothing to say at all. It sat there, agreeing with everything, quiet as a held breath. At about 3:10 I was on unmarked country roads, in country I did not know, in the dark. And the roads began to help. I do not know how else to describe it. Every junction I came to, the road I wanted was the obvious one, the wider one, the better surfaced one, the one that curved invitingly, while the alternatives narrowed into farm tracks. I was not choosing. I was following the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance was continuous, and it ran exactly along my line, through countryside where roads have no business running straight for that long. At 3:17, my headlights picked up a sign, It was an ordinary road sign, white, reflective, the kind that gives you a place name and a distance. Nothing about it was strange, except that it was there, on a road that was not on my map, and that it had no arrows on it and no distance printed. It simply carried one word: meridian. I stopped the van in the middle of the road, and I sat looking at it, with the engine running and the headlights on it, for a long time. And I want to tell you the thing that turned me around, because it was not courage and it was not sense. It was the radio. The radio in that van was on, low, the way it always was, a talk station I had been half listening to for 2 hours. And when I stopped in front of that sign, it faded. Not to static. It faded, and underneath it, very clear and very calm, there was a tone. A single low tone. Holding. I have since learned that other people know that tone. I did not then. But I have driven for 9 years with a radio on, and I know what a dead band sounds like, and this was not a dead band. This was a frequency doing something. I turned the van around. It took me 4 attempts on that narrow road, and my hands were not good, and the whole time the tone kept going, and the sign stayed in my mirrors with the reversing lights on it. I drove west until the sun came up. I did not stop once. I resigned the following week. I gave them a story about my back. 2 things I have not been able to explain. The first is the van. When I took it back to the depot, I did the thing I always did at the end of a shift, which is a walk-round check. And on the inside of the driver's door frame, at about the height of my shoulder, where I would put my hand 100 times a day getting in and out, there was a mark. 3 lines converging to a single point, scored into the paint, small and precise. It had not been there when I signed the van out. I have thought a great deal about the fact that it was inside the vehicle, where only the driver would ever put a hand. I did not report it. I handed the keys in and I walked out, and I have not driven anything further than the shops since. The second is the letter. No stamp, no postmark, pushed under my door in the night about 3 weeks later. 1 sheet, 1 number in plain black ink. 1033.7. I know now what that is. I did not then. I have not tuned a radio to it, and I do not intend to. But here is the thing I cannot put down, the thing I turn over every night. The reason I am telling this to strangers, instead of keeping it to myself like a sensible man. That satnav was not broken. It was not hacked. It was a sealed commercial fleet unit talking to satellites, and every road it offered me was a real road, and every one of those suggestions was individually reasonable. Nothing about it was ever wrong enough to argue with. Which means whatever wanted me to drive east and a little south did not need to break anything, or force anything, or show itself at all. It only needed to make one direction very slightly more convenient than the others, and then wait. And I want you to think about how many things in your life quietly suggest a direction to you, and how few of them you ever argue with, and how patient a thing would have to be to move a man 200 miles with nothing but politeness. I think it is still doing it. I think it is doing it to everyone. I think most people simply arrive somewhere eventually and never once wonder why the roads were so agreeable. My name is Gerald Voss. I said at the start that a road is an argument somebody won. I still believe that. I have just had to change my mind about who is still arguing. For 9 years, I thought I was the one choosing. Every junction, every route, every small decision about which way to go, mine. That is what driving feels like. That is what a life feels like, mostly. A long series of turns you are fairly sure you chose. But you do not choose against convenience. Nobody does. You take the wider road, the faster route, the way that is offered. That is not weakness. It is just how a person moves through a day. And anything patient enough to shape what is convenient does not ever have to make you do anything at all. There is a sign on an unmarked road in open country where no map shows a town. It has one word on it and no distance, because a distance would imply you might not get there. I turned around. I am one of the very few, I think, who has ever turned around. But I did not undrive those 200 miles. They are still in me. And sometimes, on an ordinary afternoon, I catch myself thinking about how easy the roads were that night, how helpful, how every turn came up wide and well-surfaced and obvious, mile after mile, in country that had no reason to be built that way. And I understand that I was not driving toward it. It was reeling me in. And when I turned around, it simply let go of that particular line and went back to being patient. My name is Gerald Voss, and this was my signal.
Signal lost. New story every week. Have you heard the frequency?